a book with 36 chapters and 54 contributors. How do we build transnational dialogue around contemporary photography? How do we get past national and cultural stereotypes? So, my name is Lucy Soutter. I'm the course leader of the Expanded Photography MA at the University of Westminster. And I'm an artist and a critic and a photography theorist. So I recently finished co-editing a book called The Routledge Companion to Global Photographies, a book with 36 chapters and 54 contributors. And it was just published last Friday. The book is available free online to read, but I haven't seen a physical copy yet. I'm here today to talk to you about the process of producing the book because it was an experiment in how to produce a collaborative, non-hierarchical collection of texts from around the world with the desire to share hyperlocal practices, and in the process to offer a big picture, though of course an incomplete picture, of how some international practices are intersecting and connecting. Originating in the UK, but including content from many different continents, the book sets out to break down the binary opposition of center and periphery so that a broader range of practices can be shared, honoring their local and global meanings while seeking broader understanding. We're very conscious of the way that England has been a major player in the history of colonialism around the globe, with a sense of intellectual arrogance in the writing of history and the production of academic discourse. So from the start of our project, we were less interested in promoting our own intellectual agendas from a UK perspective than in providing a platform to explore how our photography colleagues in other continents might be working and how they might be thinking about it. So today, I do not speak as the owner or author of a project that contains 54 contributors, but more as a contributor and promoter of it. So this is just a background image of the kinds of things that people think about if you say global photography, right? The goal of the book was to get beyond some of the more superficial ideas about what global photography looks like, maybe. So here are some of the problems we wanted to address. How do we build transnational dialogue around contemporary photography when there are significant differences in our language, our terminology, our education systems, our cultural frameworks, and our historical contexts? How can we break through these tendencies to understand each other's art in more layered, complex ways that acknowledge both what we share globally and also the local contexts that contributed to the work's original meanings? How do we get past national and cultural stereotypes? One of my own areas of research in the last few years has been translation studies and the hybrid academic discipline of cultural translation. So it's interesting to give this talk with a translator. These relatively new disciplines explore not only how to get the best translation word for word from one language to another, but rather the deeper issues of how to convey meaning across languages and cultures so that those who receive them can use and understand them in a way that is as close as possible to the original intended meaning. It is the role of translators to bridge contexts, to work from dual or multiple fluencies in order to produce new versions of texts that can be useful in new contexts. Translation creates new relationships and understanding. Theorist Homi Bhabha argued that the work of cultural translation involves the movement of subjects rather than objects. So I guess by that I mean like people rather than things, with dialogue and personal experience essential to understanding. Good translation is not just a matter of education, knowledge, and knowing. Sometimes it also involves confusion, humility, and the admission of ignorance. For example, my own book, Why Art Photography, has been translated into several different languages. Some of the translators have avoided asking me any questions and have produced terribly flawed translations, one of which needed to be withdrawn from circulation. Others asked me many questions, revealing their own ignorance of small aspects of Western photography discourse, but at the same time inviting me to consider the ways that the concepts I was expressing were uniquely Western, but might be explained effectively to a non-Western audience using different wording. These considerations fed into my own participation in this project. So the groundwork for the book was laid by a network established during the pandemic. The Global Photographies Network started in the UK in 2020 as a platform for photographers, scholars, and educators from all over the world to meet online to share work and ideas. During the first COVID lockdown, we could not leave the house and started to live and work through our computers. So this picture is of my whole world during the pandemic, my whole world in my little office. So this allowed us to think about reaching out to the world in a new way. A group of photography educators at different UK universities reached out to all our international contacts to see who might be interested in participating. Gradually, the network grew to include artists, scholars, curators, and photography professionals in more and more countries. But this is an aside coming on from what Tayun was saying. We did realize our network was growing in English. And English was not the language, not the first language of most of the participants. But in order for us all to come together, we were speaking English, which partly means our maps onto the map of the British Empire, but also the map of English spreading to other countries that weren't part of the English Empire, but it's a similar kind of map. So the network hosted 2 years of online talks, which took place on Zoom and were open to anyone who wanted to attend, including photography students in many different countries. While the book's 2 co-editors are based in the UK, the 6 sections of the book are edited by scholars from across the international network. These were people who'd participated in the talks program and the discussions around the talks program who wanted to become more involved. These editors had responsibility for commissioning texts and building transnational dialogue around the themes of their own sections. And a variety of contributions, including scholarly essays, interviews, and panel discussions, provide an inclusive platform for both academic and non-academic voices. So the goal has been to create collaborative dialogue across borders at a time when photography is booming in emerging economies all over the world, yet many photographers and scholars outside the established centers of photographic studies are having difficulty getting international exposure. At the same time, this is a moment when universities around the North Atlantic are wanting to decolonize their curriculums and provide a more welcoming and open-minded platform, especially for international students studying outside their own countries. That's all the chapters of the book. It's a really big book. 440 pages. Each section has 6 to 8 chapters around the themes that emerged from the section editors through the talk series and in discussion with Duncan and myself. So now I'm going to talk about the development process, and this is a little bit detailed, but I think it's useful for people thinking about a big project of any kind. The steps of the project included co-editor Duncan Wooldridge and myself. First of all, coordinating a talk series that connected international partners through curiosity and shared interests, and meeting online with the most active participants one-to-one and in both small and larger groups. This ensured that people felt comfortable articulating their ideas, their interests and positions. So we were encouraging themes and content and contributions to be initiated from all parts of the network. So this was important to break down hierarchies of center and periphery and to shine a light on previously underrepresented practices and debates. So we were empowering participants to be commissioners and editors and interviewers, and this structure allowed new networks to be formed and new discussions to develop. So we were supporting different kinds and levels of participation related to contributors' interests, skills, and availability. We knew we were operating from a historical center of photography scholarship, and so we were able to bring a certain amount of institution and financial power to the table, so contributors could each get a small fee. But we wanted to use these resources to give a platform to voices that might not ordinarily be heard and to support participants to produce an international output that they might not have produced otherwise. So we included early career academics and non-academics, and this was particularly important as many countries do not have an existing formal education system for photography. So in thinking about English as a kind of problem, we were looking out for issues around language and cultural translation, and several of the texts were written in other languages and translated into English. So after all this talk about around the book, here are a few images from the book. So the section about photography and climate change was edited from the perspective of the Global South. The two editors are from South Africa. So this is a project thinking about e-waste. The section of the book even has a chapter about photography in Antarctica. The section on decolonial practices involves some really useful interviews with theorists to help understand the idea of the decolonial, and of course includes photographers whose work can be read through this lens. So this could be a whole nother lecture of its own. But one of the strategies that gets talked about in this chapter is artists working with archival materials to reclaim lost histories. So the third chapter about gender and queer theory, the editor of the section, Alejandra Niedermeyer, is from South America. So there's a sort of South American flavor to this section of the book. And a lot of the practices in this section are particularly activist. The fourth section of the book is about new materialities, so photography moving into the space of sculpture and installation and performance, among other things. And again, this is a South African artist working with her own personal archive of family photography. This section also looks at exhibitions, photography exhibitions, and ways that they're changing around the world and working with materiality in new ways. This is a very complicated project about AI and archaeologists from Cyprus. So the fifth section of the book is about forming communities, networks, and platforms and institutions. And this section was partly about how photography circulates today. And this project involves groups of African artists taking road trips together. So this section looks at examples of very different ways that people are, different kinds of photography education, different kinds of photography circulation in different parts of the world. This was one example of a photography festival in Ireland that started from nothing and went to have a festival and a bookshop and a magazine and a website and a competition and lots of things. The final section of the book is about photo books and how they're being used all over the world. And this section was edited from Southeast Asia with one editor in Taiwan and one editor in Singapore. Because photo books are particularly important in places where there maybe are not so many galleries and museums and festivals. So next we're thinking about global photographies and circulations, a set of activities around photography and its distributed knowledges and practices. So we're looking at cross-network mentoring of emerging photographers and scholars and curators, and transnational workshops for photographers and writers, and Zoom is really good for this. Developing PhD studentships for people to travel. And we want to look at exploring more sustainable shared distribution for photography, ways that publications and exhibitions could become more sustainable. And we want to catalyze other aims and activities as identified by existing and emerging photographic partners in discussions around all the launch events we'll be having for the book in the next year. And we could think about what's happening in this room today as being one of those events that ideas might come out of. And we hope to have a conference at the Museum Hanmi in spring of next year. Conclusion. So the Global Photographies Network, which originated in the UK and was funded by a UK research grant, can be seen as taking steps to decenter Western photographic practices and debates. We're trying to create a collaborative model within which new networks can form, new dialogues take place, and local practices and debates be circulated, which might not otherwise have traveled beyond their point of origin. Look forward to seeing where it takes us next. Thank you very much.